Here's another batch of low-budget, foreign, and under-the-radar horrors that might interest those with a taste for something a little different than the mainstream. Let's start binging. Welcome back to ML Miller Frights. I'm ML Miller. Before we begin, please do me a favor and punch that like button down below. Share this video with all of your social media addicted pals. Click subscribe to this channel and ring that bell for notifications. Low Budget Binge is where we venture down the path less traveled and look at low budget, no budget, and sometimes international films that never get that top billing you see with the usual Hollywood fare. I'll indicate in the review down below where you can find these films along with their trailers. Here we go. Bloodlines, The Jersey Devil Curse, is new on-demand and digital download from Small Town Monsters. It's directed by Seth Breedlove and written by Jason Utes. While it's not the most popular cryptid, The Jersey Devil is one of the cooler ones, in my opinion. It seems to be part horse, part bat, and all monster. It has ties to the early 1900s witch hunting, cryptid sightings, and local folklore. The monster is supposed to roam the thick forests of the Pine Barrens in South New Jersey. And Bloodlines is a documentary that gives those who may not be up to date on the lore the lowdown. Bloodlines is reenactment heavy, unlike Bigfoot, who has all sorts of grainy footage and physical evidence such as footprints, nests, and hair samples. There really isn't a lot of hard evidence on the Jersey Devil. So this documentary relies on acting out supposed sightings of the monster through the years. 3 such events are given the spotlight, and while the shorts aren't setting any thespian records, it does have some sweet CGI, making these segments watchable. I'm not going to lie to you, this wasn't the best documentary the Small Town Monsters group has put out. The lack of compelling evidence, the lack of field investigation, and the overabundance of reenactments make for a by-the-numbers focus on the monster and its history. As a fan of all things cryptid, I can count on every Small Town Monsters documentary for a thrill or two, but this is one of the less effective ones. Hopefully there will be another Bigfoot documentary coming soon. Those really are informative and fun, as it seems director Seth Breedlove really has a passion for the Bigfoot stuff. Bloodlines, The Jersey Devil Curse, delivers the bare minimum and would only be useful for those who know nothing about this weird little cryptid. If you're looking for better fictional films about the Jersey Devil, I suggest The Barrens by Darren Lynn Boozman, the Blair Witch found footage prototype from the 90s called The Last Broadcast, and the do-it-yourself lo-fi goodness that is the Bad Ben series. Shady Grove is new on-demand and digital download from Gravitas Ventures. It's directed by Dale Resteghini and written by Nathan Dalton and Niki McElroy. Mark, played by Todd Anthony, his girlfriend Shayna, played by Niki McElroy, and their friend Eli, played by Juhan Jones, take a relaxing vacation at an Airbnb in the countryside called Shady Grove. Once they arrive, they begin to notice strange things occurring around their rental home. When Eli picks up a few of the local ladies to party with, he accidentally invites a group of murderous locals to the mixer. Shady Grove is alright, I guess. It basically takes 3 African-American protagonists and tosses them into the country where there looks to be no black people for miles and miles. While the film doesn't come right out and talk about the fact that the protagonists are black and the antagonists are a bunch of white country hicks, it's made pretty obvious. In fact, I have to give Shady Grove some credit for not making this a skin color issue. The murderous cultists don't seem like racists. They're just out to murder and push their cult practices forward. And the trio of stars don't go out of their way to bring up racial issues, since they have their own problems to deal with. For that, I felt the film either felt like a throwback to a time when racial issues were not on the tip of everyone's tongue, or a refreshing move forward from films that have to be about some kind of social issue in order to be made. This makes Shady Grove just a movie about 3 people being stalked by a weird country cult wearing bags and animal masks on their heads. And as a horror movie, it does its job well enough. While no one on this film are outstanding, the three main actors, Anthony, McElroy, and Jones, are likable and relatable all the way through. Mark is noble, cautious, yet dedicated to Shayna. Shayna is questioning what she wants in life, and while she recently experimented in a relationship with a woman, she now wants to settle down with Mark and finds herself pregnant with his child. I found this couple's relationship believable, and while I think I would have liked to have the relationship issues reflect the horrors they encounter a bit more, they managed to flesh out their differences and reasons to be together fairly well. Less tolerable is Juhan Jones as Eli, who mainly serves as the party guy acting goofy and horny all the time. A little of Jones' antics goes a long way, and while he manages to show some depth later in the film, he is by far the most annoying of the bunch. I didn't expect much going into Shady Grove, and found myself pleasantly surprised. It's nothing new, just backwoods hillbilly cultists invading the protagonist's home and doing some murdering. I will say that one of Eli's love interests, Victoria Baldassara, is pretty swell to look at, and definitely has a strong presence in the films for such a small part. Shady Grove doesn't do anything necessarily wrong. It simply is another backwoods horror film, and if you're interested in a harmless one of those, this one is that. All Jacked Up and Full of Worms is now streaming on Screambox. It's directed and written by Alex Phillips. Two men with little direction in their lives find solace in a new kind of drug, worms. As their lives spiral out of control, they really don't care, as long as they have earthworms to eat, snort, and digest. I guess that's pretty much the plot of All Jacked Up and Full of Worms, a Chicago-filmed descent into madness. This is a film that is less of a narrative and more of an experiential, culminating in a climax filled with disgusting imagery, bizarre sounds, flashing lights, and people tripping their asses off. There are hints of a story as both of the leads, Philip Andre Botello and Trevor Dawkins, as Roscoe and Benny, respectively, are both attempting to find happiness. Benny wants desperately to be a father, while Roscoe simply seeks some kind of companionship, though his girlfriend Samantha, played by Betsy Brown, who we last saw in an amazing performance in The Scary of the 61st, was more interested in experimenting with drugs and sex with other people than Roscoe himself. Roscoe and Benny meet through happenstance and end up doing worms together, sharing an absolutely bonkers time and finding little else in life that compares to that feeling. Much of the film is spent following Roscoe, Benny, and a few others as they trip through hallucinations and life causing real-world catastrophes in their wake. I can imagine seeing this film on the big screen and having it make a huge impact on people visually. Through image and sound, the film really does take the viewer into mind spaces and trippy lands that truly do make you feel like you're on the drugs the cast is taking. Personally, I'm into films with a little more storytelling depth, but though the narrative is all over the place, writer Alex Phillips creates two characters in Roscoe and Benny that are relatable and lovable, even while doing this bizarre drug and more bizarre things. When Benny and Roscoe begin to find their lives in danger during the climax, I was surprised how much I cared about their fates. That's due to a combination of good acting and character work. While I haven't seen these two actors before, Botello and Dawkins carry the film and cause it all to make some kind of sense. I mean, this is a nonsensical movie. At least, I think it is. It doesn't seem like it wants to communicate some kind of deep meaning or theme. It's just trippy stuff happening when a couple of people discover a new drug. If you're a fan of absurdist horror outings like Rubber, St. Bernard, and The Wild World of David Lynch, I'm pretty sure you're going to be pretty jazzed about All Jacked Up and Full of Worms. I can't say I understood it all, but I can say my eyes were thoroughly entertained by every depraved, disgusting, and disturbing minute of All Jacked Up and Full of Worms. The Sleep Experiment is new on demand and digital download from Redwater Entertainment. It's directed and written by John Farrelly. 5 inmates are chosen to do a sleep deprivation experiment for a secret scientific institution. If they make it through 30 days without sleeping, with the aid of a specific gas that prevents sleep, their prison stays will be shortened. The experiment was to be used for the military if proven to work. Left with enough food to eat, books to read, and a journal for each to process their thoughts, the subjects find that staying awake is a surefire way to go stark raving bonkers. Sleep Experiment is a full-length feature based on the popular creepypasta, The Russian Sleep Experiment, which I have linked to down below before the comments, if you haven't seen it. It's a fun, creepy bedtime story about a group of prisoners experimented on to see what happens to someone when they go too long without sleep. For a good long portion of the sleep experiment, the film follows the same format almost beat for beat, depicting the descent into madness of these 5 men as they struggle with constant consciousness. The performances are strong, and even though I didn't recognize any of the actors, all of them seem like actors who will most likely go places after this movie. They depict the drama going on in the cell well, selling the isolation and chipping sanity every step of the way. The film does a good job of truncating what turns it to be around 15 days into about an hour and 15 minutes without feeling like large gaps of the story has been left across in order to get to the dramatic, grueling, and violent end. For the most part, the segments in that locked room with those 5 inmates are tense, enthralling, and in the end, downright horrifying. Unfortunately, the sleep experiment tries to be more than just the experiment, and I think that's where the whole thing goes sideways. The sleep experiment spends an awful lot of time answering questions that and I don't think anyone, wanted to know the answers to. It sets itself up as some kind of mystery, but unfortunately, that mystery simply doesn't live up to the real interesting part, that being what sleep deprivation does to someone. Instead, the film tries to venture down the avenue as to why someone would want to do this to a group of people. We know back in the day, scientists used to do some very callous and horrendous experiments on innocent and unsuspecting people. That's horrible, but it's not some kind of revelation about the human condition that this thing occurred. This film being set up as a horror movie about a descent into madness, paired with the film's similarity to the sleep experiment creepypasta that most everyone has watched before, questions how someone could be so cruel, though it really isn't the kind of question that feels like it was set up along the way. But the final moments attempt to use a usual suspect sort of end that is supposed to blow your mind. Instead, it ended up leaving me underwhelmed. Despite the misguided ending, I recommend the film for fans of single-location films and mad science horror, such as the Stanford Prison Experiment. It dares question how strong the human mind really is by putting a huge strain upon the test subjects with terrifying results. This one gets gory and violent, but unfortunately shies away from the supernatural ending of the creepypasta, which is what makes the story so iconic in the first place. It's a bold move by filmmaker John Farrelly, but one I think ends up steering the film off course by the end. Expect strong performances across the board and some downright brain-rattling moments, but this one makes a few decisions that keeps me from giving it a full recommend. All Eyes is new on-demand and digital download from Gravitas Ventures. It's directed by Todd Greenlee and written by Alex Greenlee. After a guest kills himself live on the air, a podcaster named Alan, played by Jasper Hammer, finds himself without a job and possibly facing charges for the incident. Looking for a new direction to go, Alan comes across a letter from a strange man named Don, played by Ben Hall, who claims there is a monster with 100 eyes lurking around the forest on his property. But once he meets Don, Alan wonders if the monster is real or just all in Don's head once he sees Don's reclusive lifestyle amongst a series of traps and dangerous weapons littered about his property to protect himself from the monster. Is this the story of Alan's lifetime, or just the last story he covers before he dies? All Eyes comes from the guys who brought you Home with a View of the Monster, another lo-fi monster movie focusing more on character and conversation than the monster itself. If you're looking for giant cryptid action, this isn't going to be the film for you. Basically, All Eyes is about a man who is lost, getting to know another man who is lost, and both of them trying to find out a way to conquer their fears and move on from past defeats. Alan has a failed podcast and the guilt of playing part in someone's death. Don was always an eccentric, but having lost his wife, he feels the only thing to do to honor her is to take down the monster. That monster represents all of the grief and regret and loneliness that both of these men feel. It's a wonderful little slice of life, focusing on two men dealing with loss. But that doesn't mean this is all sipping tea and talking about feelings. All Eyes takes place in a house of horrors of Don's creation. He's triggered the house with traps, mines, and machine guns to defend himself from the monster. But he does such a good job of it, he's made Alan and himself prisoners of his own creation. Again, it's another metaphor of how guarded and shut off Don has become, an extreme path that Alan may take someday if he keeps on this course. But in this case, it doesn't require a huge CG budget to make it real, so much of the film is more about survival against a monster of Don's own making. Put these two things together and you have a monster story where it doesn't really matter if the monster is real or not. You do eventually get to see a monster in the woods, and while the CG isn't the best, I feel it's better than most due to some creative ways of filming. All Eyes ends up being much more than it starts out to be, a deeply soulful story about real emotions that makes you care about both characters greatly by the end. Jasper Hammer plays the cynical podcaster with nowhere to go and offers up a grounded contradiction to Don's wild antics. But the real showstopper is always the fantastic Ben Hall, who has been on quite a roll lately, starring in the last three Mickey Reese films, Climate of the Hunter, Agnes, and Country Gold. Hall plays the part with crotchety glee, giving life to this broken man searching to overcome his own monster by killing another one. No, this isn't a gore fest or a monster mayhem movie. It doesn't have a high body count, though blood is spilled. There are moments of wonderful tension and suspense, but what sets All Eyes apart from most films of this lo-fi subset is the care and attention put towards character and feelings. That is what makes All Eyes a wonderfully unique monster movie. Dark Glasses, aka OCCHIALI NERI, is new streaming on Shudder. It's directed by Dario Argento and written by Dario Argento and Franco Ferrini. A serial killer stalks the streets of Rome, seemingly targeting prostitutes and strangling them using a wire from a cello. His intended fourth victim, a high-class prostitute named Diana, played by Ileana Pastorelli, eludes him, but as she drives away, the van-driving madman rams her car, causing it to crash into another vehicle containing a Chinese family. Awakening in the hospital, Diana finds out she has lost her sight permanently. She attempts to adjust to her new life, and is aided by a volunteer from the Blind Society named Rita, played by Argento's daughter, Asia Argento, who at first Diana spurns away, but soon comes to respect their relationship. The only other survivor of the crash is a young boy named Chin, played by Andrea Zhang, who Diana feels sorry for and takes under her wing when she suspects that the killer is out to kill the both of them, the sole survivors of the crash. It's kind of a twisty-turny plot, but this is a giallo, and they often are pretzeltine in narrative shape. It's also an Argento film, which often begins concretely, yet soon unravels into something much more ethereal and dreamlike. Having endured Argento's last film, Dracula, I approached Dark Glasses with trepidation. Dracula was almost unwatchably bad. Terrible performances supporting a flimsy and by-the-book narrative that loosely follows the original Bram Stoker story. After watching that film, I felt the 82-year-old maestro of giallo horror had lost his touch. So I found myself dreading to see another train wreck of a film, yet hopeful that Argento could redeem himself after his last blunder. Turns out neither occurred. I love giallo films. I love them for the way they look and feel. I love the loosely tied plots, the random tangents traveled, the oddball detective work, and the over-long roundabouts taken to solve the mystery. There's wonderful murder and mayhem to be found in these twisted tales from Italy, and hopefully, one day soon, I'll be able to begin a series of videos looking solely at this influential and strange corner of the horror genre. Argento was once one of the rulers of all things giallo, delivering menacing mysteries and murders with a wicked, complex, and perverse edge like few others in the genre. While his heyday seems to have passed, with Dark Glasses, Argento turns in a passable giallo that might have felt more comfortable in a time when giallo was a more popular and beloved genre. The main issue with Dark Glasses is with its lead. While stunning, Ilenia Pastorelli plays Diana as vapid and distant. She's sexy, but vacant in both heart and soul. She's far from the hooker with a heart of gold, and while she really didn't do anything that makes her deserving of her blindness, she also doesn't really do much to warrant a reason to follow her through the story. She walks around snout raised through the streets of Rome, barely acknowledging others and moving from one high-paying John to the next, yet treating each like trash once they've paid her. Once she loses her sight, she's mainly focused on herself and expects everyone to take care of her. She even begins the relationship with the boy Chin as a means to salve her own guilt, and only forms a bond with him much later when she needs him to be her seeing eye boy. She just isn't a relatable or nice person, and therefore I didn't really feel investment enough for this aloof and vain tramp. But aside from a decent and elegant performance by Asia Argento as the blindness adjustment specialist, there really is not a lot of great acting going on in Dark Glasses. The boy Chin is grating and speaks as if he is stolen from a dubbed martial arts movie from the late 70s. This lag in acting may be due to some bad dubbing work, but watching the actor emote and move through the scenes, it's quite obvious that young Andrea Zhang is no thespian. You know it's badly acted when the best and most relatable actor is the seeing eye dog. One of the fun things about many giallo films is that it's fun to play along and guess who the killer is. But Dark Glasses also really isn't interested in prolonging the suspense on the revelation of the killer's identity. It's revealed nearly halfway through, and that reveal lacks any and all kind of oomph. There's no potency to the reveal. He's just shown in the van he was driving around in at the beginning. There's a sheer lack of suspense that occurs through most of Dark Glasses that makes me wonder if this is the same person who shredded my nerves with Suspiria. Diana loses her guide, Chin, only to find him moments later, with no real event occurring in between. It's just a case of one thing happening, then the next, with no real sense of urgency or tension. While I admire Argento's gumption to continue making films, Dark Glasses simply lacks the power and potency to thrill. Diana is unbearable to follow when she has sight, and even worse when she loses it. And there's no real mystery going on for the viewer, as Argento shows all of his cards midway. Aside from an admittedly decently paced and gory first kill, it doesn't even deliver on the scares or gore either after that. Check out any of Argento's 70s, 80s, and even 90s films for giallo done fun and right. Dark Glasses is low tier compared to those classics.
You're doomed to live the life you're meant to be, stuck inside your reality. You're